How's it, lead listeners? Listen, I'm not going to waffle today. We've got lots to get to. The crucial work by our News24 Investigations team with journalist and author Jeff Wicks over the past more than 3 years has finally seen the law catch up with the notorious cat Vusimusi Matlala and a dozen police officers who allegedly colluded to push through a dodgy SAPS tender worth multi-millions, all to line Matlala's pockets and those closest to him.
This has been in the offing for quite a while, and it's a complex operation. You know, when you're dealing with 14 accused persons, it's a logistical nightmare to first understand where all of these people are and then make sure that they get arrested promptly on the same day. So it was an operation that stretched over hours, and it seems that the chief calamity took place at police headquarters with, and I was told, a commotion in the basement parking lot when some of these officers resisted being placed in handcuffs. In any event, that resistance amounted to naught, and they were taken into custody, and all of them spent a night in a cell last night, which is something of a damning indictment of our police, but we'll get there.
Meanwhile, from Gauteng to the Eastern Cape, the ANC is fighting with itself over who will end up triumphing what's shaping up to be a highly contested provincial elective conference. Just ask our journalist there, Soyiso Maliti.
That litigation has been brought by little-known ANC members, Lwazi Khoja, Sinatemba Mbande, and another Mrs. Mzotwa. So what they're arguing essentially is in line with what Nasengu Kaitobi is telling the PEC, the NWC, and Balula, that the branches have not been constituted in a manner that allows for a healthy elective conference. So perhaps they're sensing that their campaign is in danger as a result of the alleged branch manipulation process. So which is why they've taken the urgent court application direction.
Finally, I'll end off with, on this day in South African history, we hear about the Nieuwe Haerlem ship which wrecked off the Cape of Storms back in the 1600s.
New episodes of The Lead air Monday through Thursday at 7 p.m.
Quick, Roby's Pointless Braai Quiz. How many soldiers are destined to hit the Cape Flat streets by next week? Well, if you've been reading News24, you'll know that answer, and I'll give it to you a little later. My name's Graeme Robenheimer. This is The Lead, and this is the South African story. Moving to our top story today on The Lead, well, joining me now from our Randburg studios is our investigative journalist Jeff Wicks with the very latest in the Vusimusi Cat Matlala saga. Jeff, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
Thank you, Graeme. I'm a bit tired after being up late last night following all of the developments in this case, but they're now before court, so part of our job is done.
Absolutely. Can we take this moment for all of us on behalf of the News24 team to say well done on your dogged journalism of the past more than 3 years plus, and also take a moment to remember slain whistleblower, of course, Babita Diekran, who's of course the whistleblowing from within the Tembisa hospital tender scam corruption saga that you took up the charge of her initial findings. Well done, Jeff.
Oh, thanks, man. And it behoves me to mention at this point that whilst my name might be on these stories, the reality is that there's a whole network and team behind it that gets these published and looking at the way that they are. And then, of course, there's our sources, the people who risk life and limb to come to us with information, and our subscribers who help bankroll what we do. So, in as much as I'll take the flowers in this case, I do so knowing that a lot of people brought me to this point.
By the time I was wrapping up in the newsroom last night, of course, the news had come in. You had broken it on the front page of News24, and there was the sweeping raids in central Pretoria, in the heart of Pretoria. The NPA's investigating Directorate Against Corruption, or IDAC for short. These officers descended on the SAPS headquarters, Wachthuis, cuffing some senior officials. Take us inside that moment based on the information that you have.
So this was an operation that has obviously been extensively planned, and I doubt that it's something that they woke up yesterday morning and started putting on paper. So this has been in the offing for quite a while, and it's a complex operation. When you're dealing with 14 accused persons, it's a logistical nightmare to first understand where all of these people are, and then make sure that they get arrested promptly on the same day. So it was an operation that stretched over hours, and it seems that the chief calamity took place at police headquarters with, and I was told, a commotion in the basement parking lot when some of these officers resisted being placed in handcuffs. In any event, that resistance amounted to naught, and they were taken into custody, and all of them spent a night in a cell last night, which is something of a damning indictment of our police, but we'll get there.
Apparently one of the police officers even tried to squirm away. Is that right?
So we were told that one of the individuals, was alerted to the presence of IDAC at Wachreis and tried to slip out, unsuccessfully, of course, because I see him now on the television sitting in the dock.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, lead listeners, as Jeff and I have this conversation now, these 12 officers arrested, as well as Vusimusi Matlala and one of the managing directors at Medicare 24 Tshwane District, are appearing in the dock in central Pretoria. What's so important, it's a simple fact to you and I, but I think sometimes people forget this when they're occasionally, casually following the story. But up until this point, the Cats only faced counts, many of which of attempted murder in connection with the attempted hit on his former lover, actress Tebogo Dobojane. But now he's facing fraud, corruption and money laundering as well. And it's all got to do, of course, with your reporting on the now cancelled 360 million rand SAPS health services tender. Many of these officers were, in fact, part of the bidding committee, the internal SAPS bidding committee, and they now find themselves on the wrong side of the law. Who are the main figures here as part of that bidding committee, or the main figures from within the police headquarters that now find themselves flanked with the cat in a Pretoria courtroom?
So there's a couple of names that are worthwhile remembering, and these are people that we've also written about before. So, of course, we've got Ozempic Rachel Macheng, who has appeared before the Madlanga Commission. We've written before that she accepted cash payments and gifts of Ozempic from Matlala. That's somewhat trite at this point. Then we've got an individual named Brian Neville Cartwright. He's incredibly interesting, and he's something of a linchpin in this matter. So if the state's case against these policemen proved true, then all of these cops enabled Matlala's tender and basically paved the way for him to be paid. And chief among them is Cartwright. Cartwright was the facilitator of the tender, and in that role, he is responsible for all of the administration in that part of the process, from actually drafting the specifications for the tender and then taking minutes during the BEC and then pushing it up to the BAC, where it's finally decided and awarded. Cartwright was intrinsically involved, and the balance of the officers represent members of the BEC, and the state's case is that they willfully misled the bid adjudication committee by making misrepresentations in their report about due diligence of Matlala's company. And there's several things that they failed to mention, which would have ultimately disqualified him. So, when we look at these officers, we should understand that these are what I would call the facilitators. They were the ones who either by their inaction or their action made it possible for Matlala to win this tender and ultimately be paid 50 million rand.
Right. One or two other figures, retired former Brigadier Petunia Lenono. You and I have spoken in a past edition of The Lead, I think, to my knowledge, possibly around 10, 11 months ago. And you, for the first time, explained to this guy, because I didn't really know what it was, but the whole concept of javelin throwing. Could we just take a moment to discuss how this former brigadier also forms part of the picture?
Yes, of course. And my apologies for forgetting dear old Petunia Lenono. So her role is also interesting. She was a brigadier in the police's psychology services. She was part of the bid specification committee. So she essentially tailored a tender that Matlala went on to win. And what she did was, on the eve of the award, days before it, in fact, she resigned from the SAPS after a somewhat lengthy career of service. And within months, we traced her to the employer of Vusimusi Matlala. Now, that's problematic because one of the general clauses in the contract for this tender is that there will be no employment of unauthorized personnel. So there are guardrails in place to prevent this. And she went ahead and did it anyway. And, she spun us a yarn at the time that it was merely a consultancy thing, but she had a Medicare 24 email address, so that rung somewhat hollow. And now, within a year of us writing about her, she's sitting with her co-accused.
Yeah, and for as a side note, for Macheng to go to the Madlanga Commission and say, oh, no, the Ozempic and other gifts that Matlala shared with her was unrelated to her job. I mean, come on. Are we dumb, Jeff?
Well, I mean, sometimes, Graeme, when I listen to the versions put forward, and also I acknowledge the versions put forward in a scenario like Matlanga, it must be terrifying for these people because your lies will unravel and you've got some of the most learned legal minds interrogating you. And, Macheng's entire story about, the money paid to the butchery, which was actually a loan, and then the gifts of Ozempic, that's all going to fall flat. The money was an ultimate gratification for her, for all of the work she was doing in the background for Matlala. We know that, and we've written it. And now it falls to the state to actually turn the screws on her.
Right. Look, we don't have all the time in the world to be able to go through every nitty-gritty of how Medicare 24 Tshwane District, as helmed by the CAT, managed to hoodwink itself past the SAPS bidding committee and then land this huge deal. But what was it eventually disqualified for?
So it was eventually disqualified for, amongst other things, hiring Petunia Lenono, because that was a watertight reason to cancel that contract because it was in the terms and conditions. I mean, there were other things. There was, rampant underperformance. The internal audit of the SAPS had picked up indications of fronting, which now seem to be being proven true every day. And also the fact that Matlala, and critically, this is critical, he had no computerized system to interface with the SAPS. This is new. We've learned this from this arrest. And he should have been disqualified for that alone. He shouldn't even gotten out of the gates. But that's one of the key alleged misrepresentations on the part of the BC. And that's something that's going to be unpicked before a judge, which is a good thing.
Right. Okay, so Matlala in the end, look, he managed to glean some 50 million of this deal. We know that, according to various allegations on swinging from all sides, that some of this money was funneled into all sorts of areas. We've learned through the revelations upon revelations at the Matlanga Commission, it's not just these 12 cops. We've got those allegations against Richard Shabiri, the former head of the SAPS organized crime unit, and others, right?
I think the take home when we understand, the events of the arrest and then also all the testimony before Matlanga is that Kat Matlala unequivocally had an incredible network of influence and access in the SAPS that a normal South African citizen does not enjoy. He parted with his money and paid these people. And, they, to their credit, they will offer denials as thin as they seem about them being loans and gifts and things like that. But, we have a problem in this country where we don't hold our police officers to a high enough standard. It is unconscionable for me that any of these police officers, as senior as they are, would stoop as low as to associate with someone like Kat Matlala and then feign ignorance about the person that he is. What all of this tells us is that this is an individual who is incredibly connected and held sway. And it could be argued that his access and influence benefited him financially because there was no way he should have won this tender. We've been saying it for years. And finally, someone seems to be listening.
Yeah, that 70,000 Rand car loan for Shabiri. And then, of course, the infamous Impalas, allegedly for Deputy National Police Commissioner Shadrach Sabir. And, of course, the penthouse visits, the closeness with former Minister and former General in the SAPS, Bheki Cele, once upon a time. Crazy stuff. Okay, all the accused have been appearing in the dock as our conversation has gone on. According to Bernadette Wicks, our News24 legal journalist reporting at this time, the state is not opposing bail for the 12 policemen, but the state is opposing bail for the cat. That, to my mind, doesn't seem like all that much of a surprise, especially because he's currently being held at the Imbongweni maximum security prison in Kokstad, KwaZulu-Natal. But I think just hearing some of the reactions so far during the course of the last 24 hours, Jeff, one of the observations which I agree with is I think there's a fair argument to be made right now that the proof at the end of the day throughout all of this is going to be, so to speak, in that prosecutorial pudding, if you will. We really need now the courts and the prosecutors to come to the fore, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that this is going to be something of a litmus test for IDAC. It comes at a time where confidence in the National Prosecuting Authority is at an all-time low. It comes at a time when a figure like Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi has taken aim at IDAC, improperly so in my view, calling them a part of an axis of evil. So it's important to note here that they're the ones who have been investigating this tender for longer than a year, and they've now made arrests, and that's progress that we should acknowledge. It doesn't end here, of course, and from our perspective, we'll continue to investigate all of the actors named in this scenario. I catch a lot of flack on Twitter because every time I publish a story about Matlala, I get asked, well, where's Maumela and where's Mutsumi? I would encourage all these cavalier tweeters to come and see how hard this job is to do. But that said, we work in earnest, and I don't think we understand the true scale of this network. CAT is merely an actor within it, and we'll continue to do the journalism and try and provide the authorities with a guide on where to look.
Yeah, you've actually preceded my final question, Jeff, because I have been monitoring some of those tweets, and there's even been some politicians that are going, a big name that often comes up in all of this is Tender Don, Hangwani Morgan Maumela, and readers and listeners sometimes come and go and ask, why is this chap so elusive in all of this? And I also kind of, we both want to remind them, Jeff is also only one guy. Our team is also only limited in our constructs of what we get to do every day. But what is your answer to this? Why is he apparently so elusive in all of this?
The answer is pretty easy. It's because he is elusive. He's a ghost. We've been investigating Maumela for upwards of 5 years now. And up until 6 months ago, we only had one image of him. And to my knowledge, there are only about 3 that exist. And that's remarkable in the age of social media. But he's gone out of his way to remain a figure that's in the shadows. And we now understand why. We understand why because of the money he was making from Tembisa. He tried to do the same thing in the Northwest Health Department. And he and Kat Matlala work hand in glove with one another. They are very, very close. We know that. I'll shoulder the criticism. We should do better. But we are not shirking our responsibilities. And Morgan Maumela has a case to answer for what happened at Tembisa. It could be argued that he's likely to be called before the Madlanga Commission. And I think that's what we need. We need to have this man sit for some hard questions because, even something as simple as getting him on the phone, Graeme. I've spoken to Morgan Maumela once in 5 years for less than 5 minutes. And, it makes me laugh when people say, well, follow the money and where's Morgan Maumela? Please come try do this job. I'll help. It's not as easy as people may believe, but that said, we'll continue to bring the best and most reliable information to our readers as it regards to these figures because they're so important in our national discourse at the moment. Yeah, absolutely. Investigative journalism, not for the faint-hearted. You actually uncovered something this morning, and I just wanted to get this lastly from you. When was the first time the cat's name actually appeared in that, black and white on the pages of News24? When was that very first time? I've been operating under a misconception. I thought the first time we published about him was in February 2023 over his blue light brigades for his mama cat. And I was actually wrong. The first time we ever printed Kat Matlala's name was in November 2022. So, going on 4 years. And at that stage, he was a footnote in the story. And the story was actually about Hangwani Morgan Maumela. So I'm glad that we stayed on him. I'm glad that we stayed on both of them because it's proven to be somewhat important to our democratic process. I hope you get an early night's sleep, Jeff, and you take a little bit of a load off this weekend. Well done on your dogged journalism. You remain an inspiration to journalism students everywhere, and I'm very proud to have you as a colleague. Thank you, Graeme. I appreciate it. Just one last word. People begrudgingly pay for our news. You pay for the quality that you get, and you enable us to do things like pursue investigations for years, and you do so under dangerous circumstances. And, bodyguards are expensive. Tech is expensive. We use all of these things, and our subscribers pay for it. So I'm in their debt.
You're listening to the latest edition of The Lead on News24 with Graeme Rowenheimer. If you've got an opinion on what you've heard so far, drop us a short voice note on our WhatsApp hotline. That's 072-562-3179. How's it, Graeme? Yeah, and just a quick update following on from my chat with Jeff earlier in the day. Now, it was recorded before we got an update in terms of the court cases against these 12 cops, as well as Vusimusi Matlala and one of his business associates, James Murray. The very latest from Jeff Wicks in court is that these 12 cops have now all been granted bail. That's between 40 and 80,000 rand.
Bail was also granted for Murray, but bail was opposed for Matlala, as he's now expected to remain behind bars in the Ibongweni maximum security facility in Kokstad in KwaZulu-Natal. Then at the same time, can you believe it, Jeff Wicks has just confirmed that National Police Commissioner Fani Masemola is due to be charged over Kat Matlala's 360 million rand tender. The very latest there is that a warrant to secure Masemola's appearance in court, which is set down for 21 April, has now gone out. At the time of recording this, we were still awaiting SAPS comment on the matter. Shoo! What a news day. And normally Thursdays are quite hectic.
Trending topic.
Moving over to our training topic, and we cross now to Kogompo City, that's formerly East London, in the heart of the Eastern Cape, ahead of the provincial ANC's elective conference there. It's scheduled for this coming Friday. Our journalist covering all of it is our very own Soyiso Maliti, joins me live on the line now for the very latest. Welcome back to the lead in 2026, Soyiso. It's always good to have you on.
Thank you very much, Graeme, and good afternoon to the listeners. Always a pleasure to speak with the lead.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a lot to talk about. Provincial Secretary Lulama Ngukatobi penned this letter to the ANC top 7. He went over and above ANC SG's Fikile Mbulula's head just a few days ago. And he was, what is this letter all about? Crying foul about planning processes, a quote-unquote manipulation of the branches in the run-up to the conference. What do we know about the contents of that letter, first and foremost?
So fire follows smoke, Graeme, and for a very long time there were murmurs that branches were being manipulated, and these mainly affected the Dr. W.B. Khobosana region, which is the ANC administered Buffalo City Metro, so it's branches from there. There was a conference from Buffalo from the region in Khobosana last year. It was mostly delayed for a year because there were disputes among branches. They would dispute that, for example, one member belongs to this branch, or whether the branch is enough to constitute a branch. So in the Dr. W.B. Khobosana region, where Ngukatobi thought he enjoyed some support, it was delayed for the whole year, as I said. So, and these delays were largely due to branch disputes, essentially about branch, whether members are in good standing. So this has culminated in Ngukatobi writing to Mbalula to say that we've had this issue, for example, in Khobosane for a whole year, which led to the conference there being postponed, and ultimately it did end up taking place earlier this year. So he complained to Mbalula and the ANC's most powerful structure, the National Working Committee, where he set out the issues that affected the branches. He wrote a letter to Mbalula to say in August 2025 that Mbalula needs to sort this issue of branches, otherwise the party opens itself up to legal risk.
So in the meantime, the PEC in the Eastern Cape, distanced itself from this letter sort of right from the outset. And here we've got Fikile Mbulula coming out and going, naughty, I don't appreciate this. Having both, Mabuyane, the current Eastern Cape Premier and the current chairperson of the ANC there, and Ngukatobi, both in the same room, and basically chastised both of them and said, this conference is going ahead.
Indeed, to say that he was chastising both is true, but we all know he was speaking to his political opponent there, who is seen to be Ngukatobi, because Mabuyane is a known ally of Mbalula for the longest of times, and Mbalula, in his own political ambitions, he's expecting support from Mabuyane when it comes to the national conference, when it's time for the ANC to open up the succession debate. So essentially, Mbalula wants the conference to take place, and Ngukatobi is against that because he feels that the ANC is not in good standing in the ANC's branches in the Eastern Cape are not in good standing. One of the issues he highlights is that the party has not been consistent in applying its rules. So there's a mayor in the Chris Ani district, for example. He's a close ally to Mabuyane. His name is Mr. Sizani. Mr. Sizani was placed on the step-aside policy. So he was basically told to step aside, instructed by the party's integrity commission to step aside due to the fact that he had a gun charge. His gun went missing and he was charged, and he has appeared at least 5 or 6 times in court. So according to ANC policy, which was also reaffirmed by the National General Council last year in December, Mr. Sizani was supposed to step aside. And this is one of those things that Mukaitobi has consistently been trying to raise in the ANC, that some people are affected by the step-aside policy, some are not.
Yeah.
What happened is that when the committee made the decision against Mr. Sizani, Mabuyane's allies are said in the PEC are said to have overruled that and said no, Sizani can contest in this upcoming elective conference.
Yeah, it sometimes goes back to that old animal farm adage, Soyiso, some are more equal than others, and that step-aside rule has been so contentious in and itself. 100%. I mean, yeah, that can be a whole book on its own. Okay, now the very latest is that there's a court case brought by a trio of ANC Eastern Cape members challenging Umbulula's green light effectively for this conference to go ahead in Kugompo City, formerly known as East London, this Friday. What is the grounds for this case specifically? Is it in line with Mukaitobi's letter in terms of the main core issues, and how urgent is the court case? Because the ANC, from a national perspective, I think just wants to get on with things, right?
Yes. So that litigation has been brought by little-known ANC members, Lwazi Khoja, Sinatemba Mbande, and another Mrs. Mzotwa. So what they're arguing essentially is in line with what Mr. Mukaitobi is telling the PEC, the NWC, and Balula, that the branches have not been constituted in a manner that allows for a healthy elective conference. So perhaps they're sensing that their campaign is in danger as a result of the alleged branch manipulation process. So which is why they've taken the urgent court application direction. It will be interesting to see whether they get this interdict, because we are basically 48 hours away from the elective conference itself.
Yeah, very, very interesting one to watch. And it really feels like Groundhog Day when it comes to the ANC at these conferences. There's always a court case. There's always issues. There's always letters flying left, right, and center. Look, Mabuyane is going head-to-head with in Mukaitobi, as you previously alluded to. And there's these two groups, Tina Mabaze and Tina Bantu, which, what are these groups, or I don't want to call them factions. It's more of campaign groups, I think. But what do these campaign groups sort of want to push for? Tina Bantu wants change, right?
Exactly, Graeme. Tina Bantu is the faction led by Mr. Mukaitobi, and he wants to be. I'm told that Mukaitobi wants to be the chairperson, but he's not necessarily interested in becoming the premier. And the gripe that Mr. Mabuyane's supporters have is that what's the rush if he's not interested in becoming a premier? Because Mabuyane's endgame is that he's going to hold the chair position until he ascends to a national position in 2027 when the ANC has its national elective conference. So back to Tina Bantu and Tina Masebe. Tina Bantu, as I've said, is a faction that backs Mukaitobi. Tina Masebe backs Mr. Mabuyane. And behind Mabuyane are his allies for the longest of time. That would be Speaker Helen South August and Finance MEC Mlungi Simvoko, who are also campaigning for their third term on this very slate. And when it comes to Mukaitobi's slate, it includes people such as Cocter Provincial MEC, Zolile Williams, Education MEC, Fundile Gade, who are, including actually Loyiso Ngagula, who was affected by the step-aside policy and actually stepped aside, and he came back just in time to try to contest for the secretary position. So it goes back to what you were saying, that when it comes to that policy, some people are more affected than the others.
Yeah, and I think let's end off here. I mean, you spoke about this, you reported on it, Soyiso, not so long ago. It feels like 10 years ago, but it's also 5 minutes ago in September 2025, how the ANC's Eastern Cape branches, in actual fact, have been reporting declining membership, with some 300 of the branches at that point not in good standing, so to speak. And that's a big concern for the ANC from a national perspective. We know that the OR Tambo district is one that the ANC always watches. It's in fact the largest, I think, of all the districts the ANC makes up across South Africa. Going into this conference, here's a province that is traditionally a stronghold for the ANC, but it has, as we've clearly spoken over the last short while, its own kettle of problems, eh?
Yeah, we keep referring to branches, Graeme, and I think we must explain to readers why they're important. Branches essentially mean if there are no branches, there is no ANC. And if the branches are weakened, there would be no elective conference, internal elective conference. That would also mean that the ANC is weakened at the upcoming municipal elections. But as it stands, the branch numbers have been declining, and as far as I know, there are about 700 total branches in the Eastern Cape, and 500 of those have been declared ready for this upcoming conference. The report by Mbalula has a report where he says there are more than 70% branches that are ready to go to this conference, and on the other hand, Mr. Mukai Toby is saying that is not true. So we know in the Eastern Cape that the biggest branches are situated in Amatole and the OR Tambo districts, and the OR Tambo district has a lot of support from Mukai Toby, according to people I've spoken to. Amatole,
that's interesting. That's super interesting.
Yeah, second biggest region, Amatole backs Mabuyane. But Mabuyane is also a stronghold in several other big regions, such as Kresani region, which is where he, Kweremantashe and Mondli Kungubela and Mr. Kotongana all come from. So it's the Kresani district is a key region in the Eastern Cape. So for now, some sort of support that Mabuyane has stems from mainly those branches in Kresani, Amatole, and several other regions.
Absolutely. So best of luck as you cover the conference upcoming this week. It's a difficult one to navigate. Of course, News24 will bring you all the coverage as and when we get developments there. And of course, Limpopo and Mpumalanga is also due to hold its ANC elective conferences this weekend. So it's a really action-packed one from the political point of view. So you go well, and thank you so much for your insights right here on the lead on News24.
And finally,
ending off now with On This Day in South African history all the way back to the 1600s. That's 1647 to be exact. And this segment is all thanks to the South African History Online database. The Dutch ship Nieuwe Haerlem was wrecked in a storm in Table Bay. Though no lives were lost and much of the cargo ended up being salvaged. That's unlike many shipwrecks along the Cape's dangerous coastline around that time. Now, a group of around 60 crew members are reported to have stayed behind for nearly a year. Apparently, they built makeshift shelters, they grew food, and they even traded with the local Khoi communities whilst awaiting their rescue. When they later returned to the Netherlands, their reports on the Cape's strategic value, fertile land, and access to fresh supplies certainly caught the attention of, guess who, the Dutch East India Company. And that pretty much ended up proving pivotal because it eventually led to the establishment of a permanent refreshment station at the Cape from around 1652 onwards. And folks, ever since then, sure, South Africa, what a place to live. Lastly, in Roby's Pointless Braai quiz for today, how many soldiers are destined to hit the Cape Flat streets by next week? Now, I told you earlier in the show that if you were reading News24 today, you would know that it's apparently 800. This is according to our News24 sources, although the SANDF and SAPS don't want to comment or confirm on operational matters right now. But it's understood that these 800 soldiers will be leading Operation Prosper. It's alongside the police and with our journalist Lisa Lee Solomons reporting that in the past 11 days alone, 83 people have been murdered in the Western Cape, most of whom in gang-stricken suburbs. I want to hear from you. Do you think the SANDF is necessary? Drop us a comment below. You can get in touch with us by mailing us, theleader24.com. Drop us a comment below. Hit like, follow, and subscribe. That way you'll be notified of all of our editions dropping Monday to Thursday at 7 p.m. like clockwork on News24. What an edition. I'm Moch. My name's Graeme Robert, and so long as there's trusted news first, you'll always have the lead.